Welcome, I'm Terry Christensen and this is Valley Politics. Today, San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo will update us on the state of the city. Then Chris Johnson will brief us on the work of California Walks, and we'll close our show talking with Phil Trounstine, former political editor of the San Jose Mercury News. All this next on Valley Politics. What do you think the mayor's top priority should be?
I think housing and small businesses.
Really looking at our position, the position of San Jose, Silicon Valley in the world, and how we can set up our leadership for the world through systems such as the Sustainable Development Goals, the Global Goals for Sustainability.
The top priority is housing. Housing in the city is severely needed, and affordable housing as well.
Definitely housing.
Housing.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Transportation. Access to affordable transportation.
All right. Thank you.
I think the mayor's top priority should be safety. You know, our constituents need to feel like they're safe in the city of San Jose, so I hope that he does put that as number one on his priority list.
Okay, thank you.
I think that the mayor's top priority should be the people who live in San Jose right now, the folks who are struggling every day and scared that they won't have a place to live next week.
I think bringing Google to San Jose.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think homelessness is a really big problem.
I think the mayor's top priority should be to continue the leadership he's showing now at the national and even the global level about urban sustainability.
One of my major concerns is the blight around the city. Trash on highways everywhere. So I think that should be at least one of the top concerns, and homelessness.
Okay. Welcome everyone, and welcome Mayor Liccardo.
Thank you, Terry.
So we were out at your State of the City speech and we talked to a bunch of people as they were going in. A lot of them were city employees, so we didn't ask them, but we asked people what they thought your top priority should be. And I bet you can guess the most common answer. It was housing and homelessness.
Right.
So is that at the top of your list?
Well, yeah, certainly that's what I focused on first in the State of the City address. And we were spending an awful lot of time trying to figure out how we can implement a plan to build 25,000 units of housing in the next 5 years. 10,000 of them would.
What's the average per year now?
You know, you'd probably be somewhere on the order of about 2,500.
Yeah, so that's pretty ambitious.
Doubling our rate of production. You know, at the same time, we've got to do a better job of preserving what we have, and you know, this is just going to take everybody on deck to push together.
So there's this Evergreen Housing Initiative, and it's housing for seniors and veterans. What's not to like about that?
Yeah, not all housing is created equally. In this case, this is housing that be built in our Evergreen foothills. It's currently zoned industrial, and frankly, it may mean that nothing ever gets built there, and that's probably just fine with a lot of people who enjoy looking at green foothills, including myself. The problem is that this is essentially an end around the set of rules that our city created, really in collaboration with the community, with 5,000 people who came together in one way or another in community meetings and online to help us create a general plan, a blueprint for the development of our
Vision
city.
2040.
Exactly, yeah. and that really reflected a lot of the values of the community, and one of which was environmental stewardship, certainly. Another was recognition that there are parts of our city where we want to build housing and very focused on transit, for example, building high density in downtown and along our transit corridors where people can affordably be able to get around, as well as to reduce the burdens on our freeways and really reduce traffic. You know, Evergreen was never intended to be a place where we build a whole bunch more housing. It's already in gridlock eternally. It's a mess, and when you put housing that far outside on the outskirts of town, it then really stresses our ability to provide basic city services, like, for example, emergency medical response. You know, getting fire trucks out there just means you're spending really millions and millions of dollars of city resources to support a developer's plan. And in this case, it's a developer who's going to make plenty of money. These are going to be overwhelmingly $1 million homes or more. This is going to be a gated community. This is not the housing we most critically need, for sure. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with building housing for wealthy people. That's good too. But it just so happens that this isn't what we're focused on, because this isn't the critical need. We've got plenty of large homes that are cycling through as people retire and others may die. There's plenty of that inventory. What we critically need is housing for working families and for our lowest income residents. So the developers essentially bypassed the city processes, which requires a lot of public input and environmental review and things like that to put a measure on the ballot. And they're misleading people about it, about who it's going to serve and how. We think that kind of misleading approach is not the way we want to develop our city. And we're seeing they're doing this in other cities as well. And so we think this could be a really major problem for the entire state in terms of how we're trying to protect our open space and hillsides.
And Coyote Valley could be next here.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, the plan actually contains within it sort of this this ticket of sorts that would enable developers to be able to build in places like Coyote Valley and the South Almaden Reserve where we don't want to build.
Yeah.
And use this, what they call a senior housing overlay, to justify the housing. We see it as just an excuse for developers to make a lot of money and violate really all the rules that we've created with our community to try to protect
over
our
the
open
last
space.
50 years.
Yes.
It would be a big turnaround.
Since the time of Janet Gray Hayes, really, when she was mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, back to the state of the city a little bit. Last year when we talked, the fiscal outlook for the city was pretty good. There was some new tax revenue coming in. You'd negotiated a settlement on public employee pensions. What's the fiscal outlook for the coming year?
We have a small deficit, and you never like to have any deficit, but this will be manageable. It's within about 2% of our general fund, and so we'll be able to manage this without layoffs, certainly, and we're going to do all we can, I think, to be able to maintain the current level of service. But it is troubling, certainly. We had our voters approved tax increases, and overwhelmingly those dollars went to a few different sources. Some of them were good, that we want. That is, we're bringing a lot of police officers back to the city, and we needed to be able to sign an agreement with our Police Officers Association that would ensure we would be competitive as an employer. So some of the dollars went to that. Some of the dollars went to fire response and improving some other public safety needs. And then some of it just went, frankly, into the pension fund hole that's been created because the last 3 years we've had not very good returns in our pension funds. And those are things that make you shake your head as a mayor, because you have no control over those things. We have a separate board that makes decisions, two separate boards that make decisions over pension investments, and we've seen incredible growth in the market over the last year, and we're just not seeing that in the funds.
Meanwhile, in terms of national politics, you've been fairly outspoken in resistance to President Trump, defending Dreamers, resisting using San Jose police to enforce immigration law. Most recently, you resigned from a commission, an FCC commission on broadband. And I'm sure many of your constituents approve of that. What I wonder about is you're also dreaming of a new Grand Central Station at Diridon with high-speed rail and BART and connecting to other transit modes. If you offend the president, how can we expect to get federal funds for any of those projects? Isn't that at risk? You're chair of VTA now, right?
I am, yeah. And there's no question there have been plenty of issues where I've had a strong difference of opinion with the president. I don't particularly view myself as part of any resistance. I know there's a resistance out there. I'm a pretty bipartisan guy, and I work with a lot of folks on the other side of the aisle, and we're going to continue to do that, certainly in Congress and elsewhere. But certainly for big city mayors, whether they're Democratic or Republican, there's a lot to be concerned about what's going on in D.C. right now. And so, we got to stand by principle, I think, on the issues we care about. With regard to the transit funding, the good news is I think we have a pretty sensible and pragmatic and very experienced Secretary of Transportation, and Elaine Chao, who has served under prior presidents in the cabinet. I think that's a contrast to maybe some other appointees you might see out there. And I think we've had a very good relationship with the Department of Transportation for many years, and I haven't seen that change. We continue to talk to them about some of the more innovative things that Nuria Fernandez, our general manager, is doing. And so, I expect they're going to continue to follow the law. That's what they do, and we're going to expect that too, and I think we're going to find a way to get it done. I think there is something looming, though, as we think about all the challenges with this administration, and that is the census. Where this administration has really cut the legs out from our ability to count. And that's critically important to cities like San Jose. They're very diverse, a lot of immigrants. We're exploring a lot of innovative approaches with the help of some foundations around how we can improve the count. But it goes to a very core fundamental principle that really contrasts what we believe in California and what is happening right now in the Beltway. And that is, the census is about the fact that everyone counts. And it's a message that is so critically important for everybody in our community here. And whether we're talking about DACA and immigration, they're talking about the digital divide and who's able to be connected and who's not, it is clear there is just a very stark contrast in beliefs. And we believe strongly that everyone counts, and we have to continue to keep fighting for that principle.
And we need that count for certain kinds of federal funds, especially for county social services.
Absolutely. It means tens of millions of dollars to our city, our county, our school districts, everyone. It's big money for us, and of course to the most vulnerable.
Well, good luck.
Yes,
Maybe
thanks.
we'll do a show on census to help encourage people to participate. Another thing we talked about last year was the city having 800 open positions. So I'm curious whether hiring's going a little bit better now. Last year there were 200 open positions in the police department alone.
Yeah. Good news is we're making progress. It's never as fast as you'd love, but we're making progress. We're down to about 600 vacancies now. We've had some transition in the leadership and a new HR director now, and she seems to be doing a great job. On the police side, which is we know was most critical, we've hired almost 150 officers so far last year. 2 full academies coming up this year, so we'll easily add more than 100. And so we're really rebuilding the police department, so much so that I think soon we'll be hitting the budget cap of 1,109 officers, which is a good problem to have. We were so far off it in years past, and so then we'll be talking about how exactly we can expand capacity in that department.
So that's great, more cops, but crime is also up. So what's going on?
Yeah, we're seeing nationally, I think, there's been a rise in violence and violent crime in big cities. And so we know there's large demographics and other factors, economic factors, that drive some of these numbers. There's no question that our hiring police will help, though there's plenty of data to show that the number of officers is not, there's no clear correlation with crime rates. I mean, Detroit is always going to have, Cleveland, they're going to have a lot more officers per person than we ever will, and the crime rates will be a lot higher. Same with true with Oakland, San Francisco, other cities. They always have much higher crime rates than we do and many more officers. But we do need more officers, and that will help. What we're seeing is that we focused a lot of attention on burglaries because we had that spike a few years ago. That's come down now for the last 2 consecutive years. We're seeing some mild reductions, and we think we're going to continue to see that drop. We saw murders drop, fortunately, last year. We're seeing increases around robbery and assaults, including sexual assault, and that's a real concern of mine. And so I think a lot of this is driven by youth violence, and we're doubling down on strategies like the San Jose Works program, where last year we were able to get 1,000 kids who are living in gang-impacted neighborhoods their first jobs, and doing more to see how we can, through the College Promise, through a Coding 5K program we just launched, seeing how we can get more kids engaged in the path that we know that will make them successful.
Yeah, good. I guess the biggest excitement in the city, and for you, is around the prospect of Google in downtown San Jose with 20,000 employees, and there seems to be a substantial amount of popular support for it. But you know that a lot of your constituents are terrified about the prospects of higher rents. It's already happening. Higher housing prices. So what I'm wondering is what the city's doing to develop anti-displacement policies.
Yeah, great question. I think, just to go to Google for a moment, it's important to put it into context. 7 years ago, when we created this general plan with thousands of people participating, we created a vision for how growth would happen in the city. And at the time, we planned for 48,000 more jobs in downtown San Jose. So people seem to view Google as some departure from whatever was in the works. And the truth is this isn't even half of what we were hoping to make happen in downtown. So I think it's important for all of us to recognize that growth is the pattern of our city. We're going to continue to grow. If we're not growing, it means we're probably dying, and there are cities that are doing that, and it doesn't look pretty. So the question is how we manage the growth. In the case of Google, this is going to be over probably a decade before we're going to see the full build out or more. Over that period of time, in a city of 1 million people, we can certainly absorb 2,000 jobs a year. In fact, that's less than what we would be adding in any typical year anyway. The anti-displacement policies that we focused on last year or two mostly been around, for example, the Ellis Act, which is an important state tool that we can use where we have rent-controlled properties that enables us to keep units rent-controlled even after the site has been redeveloped. It's important for us to understand there needs to be a balance there, and that if you don't have some market rate units as well, nobody will ever rebuild what may be an unsafe apartment building. Particularly, we have a lot of seismically unsafe second soft story buildings. And so those are things we need to get redeveloped. So certainly we want to protect the same number of units, but we also need to have some market rate development with that.
We're just about out of time. But I ask you to think about a movie or a book recommendation for us.
I'm the only person in City Hall that hasn't seen Black Panther yet. So
that's
I know
the top of your list?
That's yes, that's the popular choice these days. I am, let me think now, of the 4 books on my bookshelf.
That you're trying to read.
That's right. I usually get through about 2 chapters before they go down. I'll just pick one I love, Bill Bryson, A Short History of Nearly Everything.
Yeah, he's a wonderful writer.
Great writer.
Bill Bryson, Short History of
Nearly
everything.
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Liccardo, thanks very much for being with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Terry.
Good. Now, Chris Johnson will brief us on the work of California Walks.
I'm Chris J. Johnson, and I'm the Walk San Jose Program Manager for California Walks. California Walks is a statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to creating walkable communities. In other large California cities and regions, we coordinate with local city-focused pedestrian safety organizations to help them develop the tools and strategies to build safer streets. But in San Jose, there was no such group, despite a spike in pedestrian deaths over the last few years. We recognized this and established Walk San Jose. This new program was started with generous support from the Knight Foundation and other sources. If you pay attention to transportation safety, you may have heard of Vision Zero. Vision Zero is an international movement to eliminate traffic deaths. It started in Sweden and has been slowly emerging in big cities in the US. The city of San Jose adopted Vision Zero in 2015, and since then it's been working on a Vision Zero plan. A lot of Walk San Jose's time will be dedicated to shaping and advancing that plan. We're here to raise awareness of the importance of walkability to the health, safety, and vibrancy of our city, and to make sure every child, every senior, and every family in San Jose has the same access to transportation options. You can visit californiawalks.org to sign up and stay informed on events and other opportunities to help make your neighborhood walkable. April 6th is National Walk to Work Day. May 4th, 5th, and 6th is Jane's Walk. Jane's Walk is an annual festival of free, citizen-led walking conversations inspired by Jane Jacobs. They encourage people to share stories about their neighborhoods, discover unseen aspects of their communities, and use walking as a way to connect with their neighbors. In October, California Walk's Peds Count Summit lands in San Jose this year. Peds Count is your chance to connect with leaders in pedestrian safety advocacy from across California. More information on these and more can be found at californiawalks.org/walksj.
Next, on Where Are They Now?, we talk with Phil Trounstine. Phil joined the San Jose Mercury News in 1978, just as the newspaper was transitioning to new management. He became the Merc's political editor. Then in 1999, he left reporting to become communications director for Governor Gray Davis. Phil left the Davis administration well before the recall to become director of San Jose State University's Survey and Policy Research Institute. On retiring from that position, he launched CalBuzz, a political news and analysis website. Here's Phil. Phil Trounstine, welcome to Valley Politics.
Well, it's nice to be here, Terry.
It's great to see you, and looking forward to this conversation. Let's start in 1978. You graduated from San Jose State. You went to Indianapolis for a couple of years, with a major newspaper there. You come back to San Jose, 1978, and that's just after the Ritter family gave up control of the newspaper, and it became corporate Knight Ritter.
Right.
So it was virtually a new newspaper. What was it like as a young reporter coming onto a newspaper, changing?
Well, that's a great question, because when I left San Jose, the Mercury News was really kind of a trash newspaper. It wasn't covering the city, wasn't covering the state. It really was a lousy newspaper run by old Joe Ritter. And when the Knights took over, and then they brought in Larry Jinks, and Tony Ritter became the young publisher, it was a complete transformation. And suddenly Larry Jinks, who had a lot of money now from the Knight folks, started hiring young reporters from all over the country and basically saying, there's sacred cows out there, go out and shoot them, and we'll back you up. And so everything we did was new, because nobody had ever covered San Jose with any kind of real journalistic objectivity. Joe had been a real booster, and that was the model of publishers back at that time. And Jinks, as the editor, and Tony as the new publisher, were just changing everything. And so it was a wonderful time to be a young reporter at a paper that was just changing its whole image.
Big investment in reporting staff.
That's right.
Big change on the editorial page, from very conservative to moderate to liberal.
Right.
You were later part of the editorial page.
Later,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And 78 was a really big year in San Jose politics. What a year to arrive.
Right. Well, see, Joe Ritter, in the old days, had referred, when there had been some movement to try to get district elections, they used to refer to them as wards.
Yeah.
They used the old Chicago term to sort of imply that it was a boss system, because Ritter didn't want them. As long as they had at-large elections, the newspaper had more power.
Yeah.
So when district elections came along, we started actually referring to them as districts as opposed to wards. That was a shift.
Yeah.
And then Ed Pope, who later became the city editor, and I did a huge series where we looked at each of the proposed districts, and we did a demographic profile of what they were in terms of their economy, in terms of their political leaning, and in terms of their racial makeup of what each of the districts would be. And we did a big supplement in the newspaper, a 10-page supplement with a look at all the new districts, and then a big discussion of the pros and cons of going to districts. You were a big advocate for districts.
I chaired the campaign.
Right.
And as you well remember, we argued about your
We argued about it because you felt like, well, there's no legitimate opposition to this, and I kept trying to find somebody who would speak up and oppose districts, and there were a few people.
I was objecting to your balanced reporting.
My balanced reporting, exactly.
Shouldn't be balanced. There are more people on our side.
And it turned out that there weren't a lot of people who wanted to go on the record speaking against it, but there were a few. And I think the outcome was fairly close. District won.
It was close.
But it was a huge change, because it meant that Willow Glen and East San Jose and downtown, Almaden Valley each had their own district council member, and that was a big deal difference. It also made the power of the mayor greater, because now you had a bigger city council and one mayor who was elected citywide. And if that mayor was able to win in all those different districts, then that mayor had power in those districts that sometimes was greater than the council member.
Yep. Right. So That went in, the district election process went into effect in 1980, but I want to go back to 78 a little bit longer because so much stuff was happening.
Right.
Also that year was the Fearsome Foursome, or
That's
the Gang of Four.
Right.
You were covering that?
I did. You had Larry Pegram, Joe Cola, Al Garza, and David Runyon.
Yeah.
And
four members of a seven-member city
seven-member city council. The four members, they took over power and they fired the city manager, Ted Tedesco.
Yeah.
And why did they fire the city manager? Well, because Ted Tedesco was the first controlled growth city manager San Jose had ever seen. Up until that point, you had the era of Dutch Hammond and these other city managers who pretty much felt like if it's there, we'll build on top of it and expand. They even referred to Dutch Hammond's expansion movement as Dutch's Panzer Division.
Yeah, like the German tanks
the
rolling
German
across
tank,
Europe.
right.
Yeah.
And so they fired Ted Tedesco, the four members of the city council, and Janet Gray Hayes was the mayor, but she couldn't get a majority of the city council. She only had three. It was only she and two others.
Yeah.
And so, but the foursome couldn't hold together. They were kind of a mess. Al Garza was later convicted of bribery.
Yep.
David Runyon was found drunk in a parked car downtown and had to resign. When he resigned, now you had a 3-3 vote on the city council, and they managed to appoint, to fill out his term, this young planning commissioner with longtime roots in the community, Tom McHenry.
Tom McHenry.
And so now you had a 4-3 split on the city council in favor of controlled growth. Tedesco's gone, but they've got Gary Schoenauer over in the planning department. They've got some big changes are happening. And so suddenly the civic religion of San Jose became controlled growth. And the notion was basically that let's not outstrip our natural resources. Let's grow that in a way that's economically important for the city to do, but let's do it in a way that makes sense. Let's not outstrip our ability to provide police and fire service, and let's not pave over the hillsides. Let's have controlled growth.
And interestingly, some of the tenets of that civic religion are being challenged today because we have such a dire housing shortage.
Right.
But nobody's saying go back to the sprawling growth that we had in the 50s and 60s into the 70s.
Well, you also don't have anybody covering it probably with any degree of.
It's best coverage on the business pages actually, because it's about housing prices and turnover and so on.
But the real issue, I mean, I got to become the city hall reporter shortly thereafter, and what was fascinating was to actually follow the changes in zoning, the general plan changes, and then zoning changes. The battles over these things were always huge.
Yeah.
And
recurrent.
And always new. And the issue really became sort of the folks who argued for infill, those who said, let's have 10, 12, 14, 18, 24 units built per acre, versus the guys who wanted to build 4 or 8 units per acre, which is cookie cutter. Anybody can go out and build housing on land, but to build concentrated stuff near transportation corridors, that was the big shift.
Yeah.
It's more challenging, and it's a big shift. If you look at downtown housing, for example, that's hard to build. You got to build high rise, you got to put sprinklers in, you got to build underground parking. That's a lot harder than building, a tract house out in the suburbs.
Yeah. We'll be back next month with part 2 of our interview with Phil Trounstine, and we'll get an update on the state of the county from Joe Samidian, president of the Board of Supervisors. He'll also talk about what he learned on his trip to Trump country. Meanwhile, you can catch up on previous shows on our website at creatvsj.org or on YouTube by searching for CreateTV San Jose. And you can let us know what you think about our show and suggest future topics or guests by email at valleypolitics@creatvsj.org, on Twitter at valley_politics, and by following us on Facebook. And now that's all, folks. Thanks for watching Valley Politics today. See you next time.